This is episode 5 of Hoops Forum, presented by Radius Athletics and a Quick Timeout podcast. I'm Tony Miller, and I'm joined again this week by my co-host, Randy Sherman. As always, we want to thank our sponsors over at 323 Sports. If you're in the market for a team dealer, we'd strongly suggest you take a look at 323 Sports, whether it's uniforms, team gear, spirit wear, sports equipment. They can do it all for your sports program. To find out more, visit 323sports.com, or you can get in contact with a team rep today at sales@323sports.com. They'll be sure to do it right for your sports program. If you're watching this live, we'd love for you to be a part of our conversation. If you'd like to share your thoughts on things, or if you'd like for us to answer any questions you might have, all you need to do is reply to the post here on Twitter, and we'll be sure to feature those comments and questions into the broadcast. We are at the time of year when probably around this time, you are either finishing up your season. I know there's a few states who are just getting geared up with basketball, but I know some coaching friends even that have finished this week or are finishing up this week. Some of you, if you're listening to this, you may be listening to it in the off season, middle of the off season, and you're evaluating how your team did this past season. So Statistical Profiles is the title of today's show. Randy, why don't you talk a little bit more about what that means and how that will look like here over the next 30 minutes or so?
Yeah, our discussion today will be mostly centered on the 4 factors, which if you've listened to Tony's podcast or listened to anything, follow either of us on Twitter, I'm sure you're familiar with that concept. But 4 factors that are most important to winning. There's a great book called Basketball on Paper by Dean Oliver that basically unpacked that effective field goal percentage, turnover percentage, the rebounding factor, offensive rebounding, and the free throw factor would be the 4 factors. And what I've done with the coaches I work with in the mentoring program that I lead is we started, I think, 4 seasons ago, getting members from all over the country to submit into a spreadsheet that we've kept to sort of, we call it our leaderboard of their data, and just start to make observations about what's impacting our performances and how we can evaluate them both like in a game and then back away from it after a season and look at what's really driving wins and losses from on paper on the stat sheet.
One of the things that we talked about on previous shows, talking about those 4 factors, and some of you that have listened for a while, the idea of maybe like what's the most important of the 4 factors for you and for your team, that may vary a little bit. And that leads us in to our poll this week. Again, you can vote on those polls each week on our Twitter accounts. Those are both on my account and on Randy's account. This week was just that. Which of the 4 factors are you emphasizing? And emphasizing not just necessarily as what you think is important, but if I were to ask your players, what is the most important of the 4 factors? What would they say based off how you practice, the things that you talk about at halftime, the drills that you do? Mm-hmm. Randy, these 4, big jump off when you get to that last one there, but even like the rank of it, we were talking about this beforehand. Well, why is this somewhat not surprising?
Well, because if you were to read the book I referred to, Basketball on Paper, shooting speaks to the effective field goal percentage factor. Turnovers obviously speaks to turnover percentage. Rebounding, offensive rebounding, which the inverse of which would be defensive rebounding. The rebounding factor and the free throw factor, they're weighted in terms of wins and losses. Like one impacts it the most, the second most, the third most, and the fourth most. And this is the order. the exact way that the poll ended up. The effective field goal percentage, which is another way of saying the shooting performances, is tops, followed by turnovers, rebound, free throw in terms of impacting or correlation to win and loss.
So before we get into looking at the teams, we had discussed, as you look at these 4 factors, a lot of coaches will ask, what's the goal then that I need to be shooting for my team in order for us to have success, win the game? So is that the correct way to look at it, or should we be looking at it a different way?
Well, this data does help in goal setting. Like if we look at models of teams in the past, and championship level teams, playoff level teams, whatever you're aspiring to be as a program, you can kind of set, if that's where we want to go, this is what those teams look like on paper. But probably just like a more nuanced way to look at it would be is like, we just need to be better than our opponent. Like if our field goal percentage is 50%, then our opponent needs to be less than that. If our effective field goal percentage is only 40, well, we can still win, but theirs needs to be less than that. So I would say winning the factor would be the proper goal.
For us, it was very difficult when you're not playing the same level of opponent every night. For coaches that aren't playing, if you have a conference, then you're playing the same level of opponent every night, then it may be a little bit easier to set the goals. But, we one night we'll play a D1 school, and then that Saturday night we're playing a D3 school. Like, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And the similarities are maybe close, but, that could be heavily impacted. And that's something that I think is a reoccurring theme that we're trying to get coaches. Maybe we didn't plan for this, but getting coaches to think about is, the game of basketball involves a lot of things that are out of your control just simply because of your opponent. Keep that in mind, because you can be shooting for this target goal. And if you don't reach that target goal, you can end up very angry as a coach. And that's almost like misplaced anger, because you're not taking into consideration, who was I playing last night? What was realistic for my team?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I would say, though, that whether you're playing top ranked team in your league or the last place team in your league, that the same things are going to lead to winning. And they're just harder to accomplish when you're outmanned, of course. So,
right. Let's go ahead and get into the first slide. Then we want to kind of maybe talk about how we're going to look at this, and then how that's going to impact what we're discussing as we go through this.
Yeah. So what I did when you and I kind of kicked around this idea, I reached out to some of the members of the program that I lead, the coaches that I work with, and just said, hey, send me a screenshot. And I know these are kind of small. The viewers may not be able to see them, but I'll go through the numbers, or the pertinent ones at least. I asked for just, hey, send me a screenshot. Help me with the podcast I'm doing, and with Tony. And what I thought I could do is just sort of like, sometimes when I meet with a new coach and maybe it's the off season, and I'm like, hey, to get to know them and get to know their team, I want to start here. I'll like, show me your stats from the most recent season. And that kind of helps me gauge what areas, are most pressing, second most, third most, fourth, so on, right? So what I thought we could do is I just grabbed sort of a random sampling from some of the coaches I work with and had them send them over. And I thought I could just sort of like show coaches what that sounds like, and what winning on paper at least looks like, or losing on paper looks like. So
Sure.
So the first one you got called up is large high school girls. A coach, his team has an 18-7 record. I know who this is, so I would update that to a 19-7 record. They won last night, so this is a good team, right? This is a good high school girls team in large high school. And you probably can't see it, viewers, but like the first number I'm looking at is sort of like an overall health number, is points per possession. And this for high school girls at 0.89 is a good number. You hear a lot about being 1.0 possession or higher for high school girls. That is possible. I have seen it done. Like, there are high school girls teams who are 1.0 or higher, but that's super elite, like along around 0.85, 0.87. That's when you start getting like into the good high school girls teams. Would be kind of just based on the observation of a few years of collecting this data. So so this team's at 0.89, so that's clearly in the good category, reflected by their record. So if you look, if I can see the screen a little bit better than you guys can. Another thing immediately is what I'm looking for is your points per possession versus your opponent's points per possession. His opponent is at 0.64. So you can see there's quite a bit of margin there, right, between his possessions and his opponent's possessions, and that's reflected in the 18-7 winning record. When his team has the ball, they score a whole lot more than when his opponent does. Don't mean to oversimplify, but it's really that simple.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How do you outside of this, like, do you start tying the four factors together to help them get a better picture of how they're playing? Like, my question is, I guess, related to this. I'm thinking as a coach, I'm looking at the points per possession, and I'm thinking like, okay, how can we create more possessions, or how can we limit the other team's possessions? Shouldn't that be impacted by the other factors?
I wouldn't think of it as creating more or less possessions. We want their possessions, to however many there are, to be unsuccessful, theirs, and for ours to be successful. That's the goal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one thing immediately, like when I look at points per possession, this team has a healthy one for a high school girls team, right?
Mm-hmm.
What goes into that? Effective field goal percentage. Effective field goal percentage is a stat that takes into account that a 3-pointer is worth more than a 2-pointer. It's different, slightly different than just raw field goal percentage, in that it accounts that a 3-point shot is worth more points when it goes in than a 2-point shot.
Mm-hmm.
This team has a 43.5 percent effective field goal percentage. That's good. That's good for high school girls. You can see their opponent has a 35% effective field goal percentage. So this, again, more margin. That's almost a 10% difference in the scoring stat. So we want to pull it apart from both directions. Like I want ours to be great, and I want my opponents to be terrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we want to pull that number apart from both directions. And he's got nearly 10 points of margin here in effective field goal percentage. One thing, if I was just scanning these numbers for this particular team, I'm looking for things he's doing well and things that they could do better. Even though they've got an 18-7 record, they're winning games, they're in the playoffs and advancing. What could they do better? I would say for this team, just at a glance, get to the free throw line a little bit more. 0.27 is their free throw factor. That's a little low. I've seen those as high as 0.4, 0.35. So a little bit more trips to the free throw line would be one thing. If you look at their opponents are rebounding nearly 1/3 of their misses, 32.7. So that's kind of at the beginning of not so hot. That could be improved upon. So if I was meeting with this coach, those would be some areas that I would kind of drill into.
Sweet. All right, let's go on to the next one here.
Okay.
We have a couple that we're going to look at here. All right.
Yeah,
next
this one
a little bit different, right?
Yeah, this next one's kind of interesting because we're looking at a team that finished right on the money for at 500, 13-13. This team is just the definition of average, right in the middle, right? However, I would, my first look at, if the coach just said, hey, we went 13-13. I have their points per possession. So, this is the large high school boys team. They're at 0.94 on their points per possession, which is really good. That's pretty good. That's almost to that 1.0 kind of elite status. Or 1.0 or higher on high school boys would be really good and attainable. So I'm thinking, okay, their offense has the earmarks of a team that should have one of those gaudy win-loss records, like playoff bound team, like doing well. But if you look at their opponent, their points per possession is 0.96, I believe. It's kind of small on mine. Let me zoom it. 0.96. So what we have is a team that's trading baskets, and if you're trading baskets, you're trading wins, right? Like I'll tell you this: I'd like to go watch their games because, hey, the ball's going through the net. They've got a good offense. The other team's scoring. It'll be an entertaining game, right? Like there would be lots of points scored, lots of offense if you're a fan of that. So that would be kind of my first evaluation. So the next step I would do would be like obviously this team on paper, like they have the qualities already to have a winning team in their offense. So my advice to them would be like, hey man, whatever you guys are doing on offense, do it good. There's probably some room for improvement, here and there. But we got to look at your opponents and their defense, because you have the ability to win games at 0.94 points per possession, to win a lot of games. So
Yeah.
This is a team who they got to get to work on defense, and that would be immediately where my advice would go, and where my eyeballs would go on the stat sheet is what's going on with our defense, or what do we need to do? What do we need to change? What something, right?
Yeah. Let me show this last one. And the reason I want to go like 1, 2, 3 is to then kind of like compare the three of them, and kind of assess similarities, differences, but then also for the coach who's maybe in the bottom that wants to get to the next level or whatever, like how much realistic room is there for improvement? What are the major things that, again, you're looking at to hopefully improve in those areas, or improve and so that we can get to that winning. So, the last one here, went back. The last one here, 9-3 record. Obviously, points per game is a little bit lower than 1, but I mean, it's still close to.
Which one was that? 9-3 record? This one here. I got it. Okay. Yeah. So this team, kind of.
This one's different from the other two. Different too.
Example.
Really good team, right?
Yeah, this is a 9-3 team. I think they're 10-3 now. I think since this was created a day or two ago, if I remember who this is. But they're at 0.96 points per possession. The 500 team we looked at before was at 0.94, so we could almost call that the same, right? Well, one team was 500, 13-13. One team is 9-3, maybe 10-3 now, if my memory serves me correctly. Why? Well, their opponent. This team's playing some defense. They're not trading baskets. They're getting more stops. There's margin between their points per possession and their opponent's points per possession. There's margin between their effective field goal percentage at 47.0 and their opponent's effective field goal percentage at 36.6. Again, almost 10 points of margin.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the plus side of the turnover battle. They're on the plus side of the offensive rebound battle. So this team has about the same quality of offense as the 500 team we just looked at, but is having a better year based on the fact that they're better defensively.
So let me ask kind of this overall picture as a coach looks at this, because they may not have you available to them, or haven't done this yet.
Well, they should.
Yeah. And haven't, or maybe they're not doing it as well as they should.
Yeah.
I mean, a younger coach, like, they just don't know necessarily.
Yeah.
So boil down what you have said, because you've gone through this process, but now summarize this. What should they be looking? Where should their eyes go first? Where should it go next? What's the overall picture? And does that vary from team to team? Could that vary from team to team?
It can definitely vary. It can definitely vary. So the first number I'm looking at is points per possession. That's sort of the stat that just sort of like is that's like your overall health score, right? Mm-hmm. Like this is our overall health score. Mm-hmm. That's the first stat I'm looking at. So if someone had a starting point, that would be it. Then what goes into that and what detracts from that? Effective field goal percentage and turnover percentage. Again, think of it like this. So like if many coaches are also teachers, right? So you've had a student who, when they turn in, say it's at the end of the grading term, they have 10 papers or assignments or tests or whatever, right? Or they go into getting their term grade. Well, they we're along about halfway through the term, and they've turned in 5 of them, and maybe they're making an A or a B now and then, and all of a sudden they just don't turn in one of their assignments. What does that do to their grade? It like that 0 that they take on an assignment just drags it down like dramatically. That's how I would say that a turnover is like taking a 0. Mm. A turnover is like taking a 0. So a lot of times what completely undermines bad teams first are one of two things. They either can't score or they can't protect the ball. So that's your first area of the ship doesn't even get off the dock if those two things can't happen. Now, That being said, there are examples of plenty of teams. I work with a coach. I don't have his stats here today. He didn't give them to me, but like his offense is not great. It's like 0.8 something. But he was gone to the regional tournament the past 2 years here in Texas. Big, that's like going to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament. So good team, but is really good on defense. So if I don't have a sexy offense, and not everyone does, maybe we just don't have those kind of kids. That doesn't mean you can't win games. You just got to do it differently, right?
Yeah. How should we were talking about this? Can this significantly change throughout the year? Maybe we're the bearer of bad news here, but like, what things maybe if they can't, is it just like, if it can, what things can potentially change? So can it change? Can things significantly change, or what are they looking for, and how long into the season should they get an idea? Because this isn't, from the very beginning, we want to make sure this isn't like we made it to the playoffs. All right, let's look at this. All right, what do we significantly need to change here so that we can win the championship this year?
Yeah, that's probably not how I would go about it. My observation, man, and this, again, I don't want to be any rain on anyone's parade, but like, once you get enough sample size, like your first game of the year, you may play like a really bad team or a really good team, and your numbers come out looking really good or really bad. And you play another game and they normalize a little bit. So after you get, maybe like a little bit into your season, 5-6 games, maybe like the sample size is there. I haven't seen them change a whole lot. Like, it's kind of like, this is kind of who you are, right? And that may be bad news to some. It may be hard to hear, but I'll watch these after I've been collecting them 4 years, and the guy, it's like about the second or third game, and this guy's at 0.95, and then about 2 months later, he's played 20 games, he's maybe at 0.97 or 0.93 or whatever. Like, it's kind of like that's you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I would think more in terms of seasons as a leader of a program rather than games or weeks or something like that, and making significant changes, that's how that'd be my answer to that.
You've had enough that you've seen a lot of different coaches. You have the advantage of bringing all those together. So it's not just one program, 5 years, but it's 15, 20, 30 programs over the course of 5 years. Are there any kind of trends that matter at all that you've noticed? Maybe style of play in relationship to these, or something? Because again, I'm thinking expectation wise, coaches have these unrealistic expectations because they heard something about a number somewhere or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so they hit that, and then you analyze it and you're like, you're not even playing that way. Why are you using that kind of number, that kind of stat to prove whether or not you had a successful year? Of course, you're not going to have a successful year.
Yeah, I would say one observation would be, we know that the elite teams tend to be up around 1.0 or higher on the men's side, on the boys' side, up 1.0 or higher. I've had members as high as like 1.1 something, like up there, winning 30 games. Like, if that's where you want to go, and have that level of play, it's very hard to do it without a 3-point game.
Yeah.
The only exception I would offer a couple of exceptions to that. You've got just an athletic freak big man playing high school. Like you just happen to have like a dude on the low post where we don't even need to shoot threes. We just get it into Big Tony and he goes to work, and it's worth, he's either going to score or get fouled, right? Like that we can come away with a point per possession if we have that. Another exception to that would be if you're able to shoot a bunch of layups, you can get to 1.0. What does that look like tactically? Usually like a pressing team. We maybe don't have great 3-point shooting, but we just straight take the ball from you, steal, pass, dunk, layup. Mm-hmm. We're taking very high percentage shots. But those are sort of outlier ways to get there, that what you tend to see from teams that do kind of dwell in this space of 0.9 something or higher on the girls' side, and 0.1 something or higher on the boys' side, is they have 3-point shooting.
Do you feel like a 3-point attempts to 2-point attempts, is there something realistic high school wise that we're even aiming for? Or is that
I've seen winning look different in that regard. Again, like a team that's kind of got some size, the 9-3 team here that we were just looking at. I know their team. I know who this is, and they've got some size. They don't really take a lot of threes, but they're living up around 1.0 because of their size.
Mm-hmm.
So that can be that distribution can be slightly different based on roster composition and sort of, the physical qualities of the team can impact that. So, so that would be, there's not really one sort of recipe. I would say, every once in a while, what I'll do just when I kind of want to begin a project, I'll log into like Synergy or check out like teamrankings.com or something like that and look at like, okay, let me find some college teams that are showing the propensity to be 1.0 or something, have a really, good, I would say some sort of common themes there is great spacing. They all sort of like I could take a screenshot of like the Oregon women, the Villanova men, D3 Nebraska Wesleyan, something like that, like these, and just like just pull just like random screenshots, like, shoot the screenshot, and like they all have good positioning on the court. Like they create width and depth with where they, for lack of a better way, just where they stand.
Mm-hmm.
But that's another common quality I would say. Like even if you do have like the high school version of Shaq and you're going to get to 1.0 that way, like if you're crowding him and you're not giving him space to be dominant, then it may not play out that way for you, right?
Yeah. So I'm thinking as a coach, 4 factors. I'm working on shooting, whether that's just getting better from catch and shoot, or I'm guessing most high schools, you're probably a lot of catch and shoot.
Mm-hmm.
The plug from last week with pace and space, creating more 3-point opportunities and layups at the rim. Go back and listen to those 2 episodes, part 1 and part 2. Just a little plug there. Turnovers, practicing turnovers, practicing playing against pressure. Do you have other suggestions for cutting down turnovers?
Get better. I mean, just get
decision
better.
Training, I think maybe more.
That kind of stuff.
This as silly as this sounds.
Turnovers is a tough one to put your finger on how to fix it. Like, man, if I could say, hey, here's what you do to stop turnovers, I would be not in a room and I would be doing this from my yacht in Tahiti, right? Instead of, where I'm sitting right now. So the turnovers is a tough one to solve, like it's a skill problem. It's a decision problem. It's in some cases, like we're little and scrawny and you're big and strong and you just punk us and take the ball. Like turnovers can be a lot of different things. And like, it sounds kind of corny and maybe even a little rude, but I always tell teams like you'll win when you're good. That's when you'll win. That's when you'll quit turning the ball over. That's when you're good. Not until then. Sorry. Like when you're good, that's when you'll win. And that's not helping anyone though. I get that, but like,
well, I think even
if I could beyond... if I could say, what can a coach do or avoid, right? Like if I have a team that's turnover prone, who's like maybe not skilled enough, not experienced enough basketball wise, I got to cut down on the intricacy, right? Like I can't ask my team to do all, floppy rip, double stagger, hold it, pass, all this timing. Like I've got to cut down maybe on the intricacy to where those maybe what I would call coach-induced turnovers are eliminated. If you think about it, like the analogy I made earlier to your grades, your grading term, if what we need for our possession, we have the ball. What we need is anything but a turnover. And like I would say to that student who's you turned in this assignment, you made a B. You turned in this one, you made an A. You turned in this one, made a C. That's great. You took a 0 on this one. Just turn it in, like just anything but a 0. Like turn in a D, and your average is going to stay afloat, right? Anything but a 0, right? Yeah. So Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of inputs into turnovers that
Something that has helped us though is the screenshots that you've presented are, crossover huddle, and if you look closely enough, if you haven't used that, you can click on those and you can see
yeah,
how you
sure.
turnover. A turnover is not all. We've used this phrase a lot too. Turnovers are not all created equal.
Yeah.
They are like, ask the question, how am I committing these turnovers? How are we committing these turnovers? Lower level than that, beyond that, deeper. How is this guy creating these turnovers?
Yeah.
Because it may be that this guy's not good against pressure. This guy just makes bad decisions in the half court.
Yeah.
And so, like, how are you creating your turnovers? I put together I click on that thing. It shows me all my turnovers. You just watch turnover after turnover after turnover after turnover. If you have any kind of understanding of the game, you're going to say, well, that one didn't look like that one. That one didn't happen that way happened. You may understand that.
Categories,
Players,
right?
Yes. Because
like,
again, you may understand that. Your players don't understand. I guarantee your players don't necessarily understand that. All they hear is turnovers are bad.
What I would do is, like, if you have the ability to go and look at all of those turnovers one after another like that through your video technology, create some categories. This is a bad pass. This is a travel. This is a, or even some homemade categories like bad footwork, our wrong pivot foot, or, and create some categories around each as you watch these turnovers. But furthermore, look for situations you can recreate in practice. Like, man, we had 15 turnovers when we got double teamed and when we set a ball screen or something like that. Like, all right, we can recreate that. We can take that moment, that micro moment of the game, recreate that, and maybe put our players into better, don't just run them for making turnovers and then not go back and address the scenarios in which they're bubbling up.
Yeah. The last one I'll ask about, just rebounding. Whether that's off, like rebounding drills, or the extent to which you're emphasizing rebounding, emphasizing defensive versus offensive rebounding. Like, how should we be thinking as coaches here?
Well, it's definitely a category you don't want to be upside down in. I would say there's some other inputs into, the style of defense you play. Some can put you in better rebounding position than others. The type of dudes you have can help quite a lot too, right? Like if you've got, guys who can go pull rebounds from above the rim, things like that certainly helps. So how should we be thinking about it from a macro level? Is we got to outperform our opponent in those categories. That's really it. As far as how that goes, again, I call up the screen with the guy with the 6-9 record, large high school boys. You got it?
Mm-hmm. There we go.
Yeah, that's it. This was one that sort of, when I did this and got to looking at his stats, it perplexed me a little bit. This guy went 6-9. That's a losing record, not a terrible record, but like it's definitely below 500, obviously, right?
Mm-hmm.
Good offense, 0.93. That's in the good category. Really good effective field goal percentage, 5.07. What jumps out to me, one problem area is a 23.3 turnover percentage. That needs to be below 20. High school boys, below 20, period. 17, 15 would be super elite. 17 down that low would be good. Like get it down. So he's got a bit of a turnover problem. So that's undermining those. He's taking some zeros, but when they don't turn it over, they're 50.7. So when they don't turn it over, they're scoring pretty well, right?
Mm-hmm.
His opponent, if we look down, his opponent offensive rebounding is 39.6. So his opponent, he's not keeping his opponent off the glass. So that would account for why a team with a good offense, who's outperforming in terms of points per possession, who's outperforming in terms of effective field goal percentage, and although his turnover percentage is bad, his opponent's is not great either. So that's nearly a push. He's a little bit negative there. This would be a team I would put into the we shot better, but they shot more category, right? Because they couldn't keep opponents off the glass. So if you look over here at field goals attempted per game, he shot the ball 51 times per game. His opponent shot it 56 times per game. So his opponent's getting 5 more shots per game than him. Still, that's not huge. I happen to know that this team kind of got a little unlucky in one possession games. They went 0-5 in games that were 1 shot or overtime type games. They went 0-5. So I would say like he kind of little snake bit, and that usually is a little more level, because when you get into a game that close, like a lucky bounce here or there might be the difference, right? So you kind of got to look past factor 1, effective field goal percentage. Factor 2, turnovers, about a push. So why did this team, who's pretty good there, lose? Well, then we go to factor 3. He's upside down in the rebounding factor.
Yeah.
And he only played 15 games. 5 of them were super close. So those 5 extra shots per game he's giving up mattered quite a lot, right? So that's sort of how I would reflect on the rebounding for this coach. As far as, man, like, again, just here's my rebounding drill. Just go pull it out of my file here, do this, and all your rebounding problems will be fixed. Again, I'd be on a yacht in Tahiti delivering this message to you. Like, but you can do the same thing. Go back and look at when we gave up an offensive rebound. What's that looking like? Is it because we're getting beat off a dribble and we got to draw a second defender over to help at the rim or something like that? And now we got a free block out. Is it because, I don't know, I happen to know this team here that we just talked about is just undersized. Just got a little team playing in a large high school division that probably most nights he's undersized, and that's just not a factor he's going to perform well. Yeah. Again, that's probably a bigger conversation, and just like the way you mature and grow as a coach, a growth. Let's not use the word growth. A decision I made to sort of pivot my coaching style away from, oh crap, we didn't rebound very well last night, so guess what we're doing tomorrow? Rebounding, block out, circle the wagons. We're going to get, block. Like, I just quit sort of like doing that, like responding to emergencies. I just don't do that anymore. And I would go as far to advise you or anyone else listening to just don't coach that way anymore. And just like, hey, given this inherent flaw, this was a team that was undersized, playing in big school, high school boys in an area that's got dudes, got athletes. He's not going to do well there. He can block out, drill. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. Right. So accentuate your positive, right? Like, given this inherent flaw, what do we need to be not just good, but excellent at to offset it? Yeah. And this guy went 6-9 because they given that they can't rebound, you can't afford to turn the ball over 23% of the time then. Yeah. Like, I went from a coach who did that, who like, oh, we missed a bunch of free throws, so we're going to go to practice tomorrow and we're going to shoot a free throw and run a line for everyone we missed, or we didn't rebound worth the crap. We're going to get physical. We're going to get the blocking dummies out, put the bubble on the rim, and bloody each other's nose and like all that crap. Like, stop. What can we do? What can we be great at? This is what we're going to work on. My mentality shifted. This is what we're going to be great at: spacing, transition, pressure man defense. If we got out rebounded and lost, my philosophy went from, oh, we're going to do all these drills tomorrow to work on a rebounding, to, well, we just weren't good enough at running. We weren't good enough with our spacing to offset our rebounding issue last night.
Yeah, that's great. Can't be great at everything. And I think coaches, they don't like to hear that.
Yeah, and not all problems are fixable with like, oh, yeah, here's the drill. Pull that drill out of the file and that'll fix it. No, not all problems are fixable.
Yeah. We'll probably end it there because that's a good ending spot. So I appreciate all of those who joined us this week. If you missed any part of the live show, you can go back and watch and listen to any part of it. Visit Radius Athletics on YouTube to see the full interview, or you can go to any podcast platform and search A Quick Timeout, and there you'll find the audio version of the show. Appreciate Randy and him contributing today. For Randy Sherman, I'm Tony Miller. We'll talk to you again next week on Hoops Forum.